incredibly proud and honored today to be joined by Rufus Reid, one of the world's most highly regarded bass players, as well as a highly recognized educator and composer. Now, I'll turn the mic over to Dick Dunscomb to conduct the interview with Rufus. Dick, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Bob. And I'm telling you, I am really looking forward to this one. This is a gentleman of tremendous talents in every area. So we're going to get into it in just a minute. But first of all, welcome, Reid.
Thank you so much, Dick. It's been a really long time since we've seen each other. It's great that you're still keeping busy. Yeah.
I am trying my best. So we like to open the interview by having you share with us how you came to study music and what led you to pursue music as your career.
I thought you only had about an hour to talk about this. But I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and the family, my mother played piano well enough to play hymns in the church, and my dad was an amateur pianist. But they separated when I was really small, but I was always told there was always music in the house. I was told that I was beating on pots and pans before I could actually walk, so, but I've always enjoyed music. Of course, when you're young, you don't really know what's going to happen, I do remember when I guess I was about 6 or 7 years old. My mother and father had separated, and then we moved to Sacramento, California. And that's where I was raised. Middle school, junior high school. And that's when I got involved with the trumpet. But before the trumpet, everyone had taken all the trumpets. So I had to have a mellophone or French horn or something like that. But eventually I got the trumpet, and through junior high school and high school, the music program in California at that time in the mid-'60s was actually quite good. We didn't have enough money to have private lessons or whatnot, but the school, there was a person that would come to our school twice a week, and so and then high school was a constant. It was amazing. We used to call them dance bands back then, and I wasn't a very good trumpet player, but I always played music. I love sports, but of course they didn't like you to play football and be in the band. You couldn't do both, and I always chose music, even though I really enjoyed basketball and baseball and all that. But when given a choice, I always took the music, and with no question. So, but my upbringing musically basically really formulated in Sacramento, California.
That's a very interesting transition from trumpet to bass.
Yeah, well, I had a band. We were in a band, accordion, tenor saxophone, trumpet, drums, in high school. We had these little shiny little jackets. We were called the Saints, and we would play all the popular songs that were on the radio and whatnot. Love Is a Many Splendid Thing, or whatever the movie that came out. and we didn't obviously have much money, so we would go to the music store, and then when a new movie came out, you know, they had the piano parts, but we would go in and look at the sheet music, and then we would start writing down the notes and stuff, and because we didn't have money to buy the piano part, so but that's how we got started. But then when we would take a break, you know, go outside, have some popcorn or Coke or whatever, I would just gravitate to the bass. It was laying on the floor, and I would start plucking on it, you know, and I think that, in retrospect, that was my infatuation that was the beginning of the bass. Kind of chose me, you know, and so when I got out of high school, I was going to go back to school to college. I was in line to take my classes, and about 3 people from the desk, I bolted and went to the Air Force recruiting office. And because I was going to get drafted, that was foregone conclusion. So, but I was told that if you passed the audition, you were going to be automatically put in the band. Now, that sounded pretty good to me. I passed the audition by the skin of my teeth, but I did because we were taught, you know, I knew my scales, and I knew I could read pretty good. I could, and I didn't have a great sound on the trumpet, but I passed. So long story short, I went home. My mother was not happy. I was 17, you know, so she had to sign for me to go into the, she had to sign for me to go into the military because I was 17. And so I said, well, you know, either carry a rifle or a trumpet, you know, and so, you know, the one that made sense. And so, and I have nothing but fond memories of the military, whereas most people don't, because it changed my life. And that's when I really began to teach myself the bass, literally, and then getting a chance to play. I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I got into this little band, and we would learn stuff off the jukebox. Nobody said, you know, this was hard to do. We just had to do it, and it was fun. But I still had to keep my trumpet up. So that's kind of how that got started. Yeah.
Were there teachers that influenced you as you moved along, or did you mostly do it yourself?
Yes, actually, in high school, I kept up with 2 of our band directors and orchestra directors. They were both trombone players. And in retrospect, I realized that they really taught us a lot about being a professional. But we didn't, you know, we don't even know it's being dealt with at the time. It was, we were taught to follow a conductor. We played shows. We played dances in a big band. And I kept up with my band directors probably until 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they taught us, at that time, I think I got all the skills to survive. I mean, information, pertinent information about, because they took us, it was Mr. Pittman, and he was the band director, and we would go on these field trips. And I will never forget this. We went down to LA. It was doing some kind of, you know, competition festival or something. And then we went down, and as a field trip, he said, we're going to go take you to the union office in LA and watch a big band rehearse. And so that was very, very exciting. And we went down there, and the saxophone section sounded louder than our entire band with drums. And I couldn't believe that kind of sound, but I'll never forget that. I have the image in my mind right now. So I think during that period, I began to realize he was teaching us a lot about things that we didn't even know we were actually being taught at that time. And so I taught myself the bass. I got better at the trumpet because I had to play it all, and that was my job. And then I started taking some lessons. But in Montgomery, Alabama was my first military assignment. Then I went to Japan, and that's when everything hit it. I saw Ray Brown live with Oscar Peterson Trio, and I said, that's what I want to do. But I didn't really know what that actually meant at that time. But that's when I saw Duke Ellington's band. I saw the Modern Jazz Quartet. I saw Toshiko Akiyoshi when she was the star. At that time, she was a young woman at that time, and it was amazing with Blue Mitchell and Junior Cook and Philly Joe Jones and Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson. I said, man, it was amazing. So I was hooked. That was it. I was listening to records and all that. And when I got out of the service, I sold my trumpet and bought a bass the same week. It hasn't changed.
What a great litany of people to be surrounded by and learn from and inspired from. Speaking of being inspired, you've done your part in the way of many people that wish that they could have. You developed an incredible jazz program at William Patterson in New Jersey. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I was in New York, and we moved. I was traveling. We lived in Chicago. My wife and I were in Chicago, and then I was performing with Nancy Wilson and also with Eddie Harris, on and off. And so when we moved to New Jersey, my first real gig was with the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band. I kind of basically appeared. I had met Mel and Thad, and when they came to Chicago and they sounded me, I said, well, eventually I'm gonna move to New York. I'd like to do that, but we weren't ready mentally or financially at that time. But that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because the credentials one had to show to play in that band. That means you could swing, you could read really well, you could follow conduction, blah, 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 blah. And you could solo it, all those things. And so that was the fantastic time for me. And that was the real beginning of being in New York, and everything else kind of took off after that, And Thad was working as artist in residence. Oops, there goes the airplane. Thad had been asked to be an artist in residence at William Patterson College at that time, and because there was no real set program at that time. And then he got offered to go to Denmark to record with the Danish radio big band and whatnot. And he left, and Martin Criven, Dr. Martin Criven, who was the coordinator at William Patterson, he calls me on September. He says, "Have you seen Thad?" I said, "No." I said, "I know that he was probably going to be in Europe, but I hadn't really seen him or knew much." He said, "Well, he should be here at the school." And he says, would you come out?" And I said, "Well, I came out." He was kind of persuasive, but I said, "Well, I didn't come to New York to teach." And so he says, "Okay." So he said, "Well, just come out and check out the program." To make a long story short, he had a vision of developing a jazz program that was a direct conduit to New York City. And so I went out and I agreed to help him out for that semester. And I enjoyed it. Actually, I surprised myself. I didn't really want to be a teacher because I didn't want to be like some of the teachers I had. But I realized that I really liked teaching people who wanted to learn. And he made, Dr. Criven, he and I kind of he gave me my head. He made it possible. He said, "Well, let's try this." I said, "Well, let's try this because we need this, blah, 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 blah." And every year, it just got better and better. We got rid of the things that really didn't work. We kept things that did work. And I was able to get teachers, players who were in the trenches. They had to be really functioning, highly functional players in New York City. And but they also had to want to share their knowledge. I didn't, and so it was easy for me to get a group of people, and that's how the program started. And I ended up being there about 10 years, and I said, well, somebody asked me how long I'd been there. I said, well, I've only been there about 6 years. Actually, my wife said, no, it's been 10 years. And before you know it, it was 15, and then it was 20. But the program really blossomed and became an accredited situation. We were the first degree program, music degree, jazz music degree, Bachelor of Music in the whole tri-state area. Now, they had a jazz program at Butgers with Kenny Barron, Larry Ridley, Freddie Waits, and people like that. It was pretty phenomenal. But they didn't have a champion in the academic aspect. So the things that went wrong, you need someone who really understands the academia and to protect things that might go awry or whatever. And I had that. William Patterson was probably, well, it set a precedence of hiring professional players, not just people with education degrees, but people who were literally doing something, recording on tons of recordings, etc., and used as what's the word, equal to, I had published my book and etc. So, if you go and work on your doctorate, you publish a book or you do whatever. So I didn't even know what I was doing. I just did it, and he saw that and put it in a package, and our program is still going strong to this day. But that's how that happened, and Thad never came back after that, but that's when the program solidified, where you would actually have a bona fide degree in music in jazz. It's the first of its kind in the tri-state area. You know, there were jazz schools like in North Texas, and of course at Berkeley. It's always been something there, but it was always, this was a small group. We didn't have enough students to even have a big band, so it was the small group was the emphasis, and it still is. There is a big band there now, but and we had big band too, but the emphasis was on small groups, and that wasn't happening around the country that much at that time. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, you know.
We certainly want to hear your voice. You're an icon in the field of jazz education, as well as the other areas of your career. But let me also say that many of the viewers of these interviews are jazz educators. So, you know, hearing you talk about that program, and I know you were involved with IAJE in a way through those years, and you know, we're trying to get the young players to come up through that as a learning process. But thank you for sharing all that wonderful information.
Yeah, that was my pleasure. And I was, you know, if we don't reach out to the younger players coming up, and I'm still doing residencies and things like that. And the music is actually in very good hands, you know, believe it or not. A lot of people really think, you know, the music has gone awry because it's not as popular as, but I tell you, they're coming up from everywhere and really playing tremendous, playing with so much more information and abilities. I just did I was in Telluride, Colorado, and I just did had 7 young 18, 19-year-old players, and they were all writing their own music. And when I was 18, I was just starting to play the bass, you know. So, and these guys were playing their tails off, plus they were writing very sophisticated music. And so things are really happening around the world, you know, that's really healthy. But we still have to keep the youth going. That's how we protect the music.
Absolutely. You know, the interesting thing about your career is you have so many different ways of reaching out and bringing the joy of music, including your touring and performing. Share with us some of the aspects of that part of your career.
Well, you know, when I met Ray Brown, I actually met him that year, and he told me, he says, you know, you have to take the music to the people. We have recordings, but you know, when I saw him play live, that messed me up. I mean, I was gone to that. So, you know, when people see you play, you leave another indelible imprint like no other. And so traveling is something that I enjoy. It's not so great now, 2022, and traveling but nobody's traveling like we used to. But when I was with Dexter Gordon, I would be traveling like 8 months out of the year with the band, which was can be very taxing. But you know, it was fine, and this is how we would travel all over the world. And I playing with J.J. Johnson. I was with him over almost 9 years, with Eddie Harris. These were like really significant gigs for me. But that's how you learned how to play and with a different audience. But traveling, to me, I loved being able to see other parts of the world. But then I also realized that the jazz music has permeated the world. So when you learn to play jazz, you're not just learning to play some music that somebody likes. This music has changed people's lives. I mean, particularly I remember traveling Poland, and when it was still occupied, and people learned how to listen to the music over the radio, and I said, wow, amazing. When I went to Poland, they were celebrating 25 years of jazz. I said, really? That's how much I didn't know about how powerful the music is. And so I'm constantly telling the young players, I said, the music's bigger than any of us in this room. But if you learn to play, you'll have people all over the world that will be interested in it. And case in point, now we have all this internet stuff. We're actually doing this video thing that can go. You don't know where it's going to go. The radio, it's being listened to probably more so than any other time of listening. The trick is now see if you can actually monitor everywhere it goes. That's the challenge.
Your book, The Evolving Bassist, and its partner DVD. What a contribution to the field.
Well, thank you. That was a funny story about how that got started. Eddie Harris was the one that said, you need to write this book. And I did my first workshop with Jamie Ebersold. It was like in the early 70s. And it was in North Dakota. It was cold. Oh man, it was so cold. But there were about 25 little young bass players, and none of them knew anything. And I had Ray Brown's book, but I could barely play it myself. There was some stuff in it. So but they, many of them said they were going to go buy it. So I was coming back, and I'm riding in the car with Eddie Harris, and I said, man, Ray Brown doesn't even know, man, I just sold 25 of his books for him, and he says, well, why don't you write your own book? I said, what are you talking about? Right, they write books. He said, who are they? He says, you're intelligent. I said, yeah. You're a college graduate? Yes. I said, you're recording with me on Atlantic Records? I said, yeah. He said, well, write your own book. And so that was like maybe 1972, and I finished it in 74. But what he told me, he says, now you must do two things. You must finish the book, because most people don't finish anything. And then he says, I want you to own the book. And I didn't know how profound that statement was, because to this day, I still own my book. And it's being distributed through, started with Columbia Pictures and blah, blah, blah. It's Alfred Music now. But that's how it got started. And one of the things that I think that has kept it's still pretty amazing to me that it's still alive now. But I think one of the things that made it accessible and still continuing because it wasn't stylized. It was just information. No matter what kind of music you happen to play, a chord is a chord, and you can. And I was also talking about the bow with the bass, and the only other books were classical books, and nobody really wanted to. No jazz person would pick up a classical book at the time just for that information. So, but I knew that the bow actually will help you make a better sound, help you strengthen you, etc., etc. So it's still happening. So I'm real happy about that. But we own it still, you know.
You bet. In recent years, you've focused much of your talents in the area of composing. Share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's almost like having a second career. Milt Hinton, we were very close to Milt Hinton, and we would go to see him when he was like about 85. He wasn't able to play anymore. I was 55. I said, wow, that's 30 years. Wow, that's like another career. So I've always been intrigued about composition. I've been very fortunate to record and be around people like Thad Jones, Bob Brookmeyer, and Jimmy Heath, Slide Hampton, and I was, how do these people write this music? And so I've always been intrigued about that, but so that's how come I actually left William Patterson, because I was, it was a time I think I needed, if I was going to try to figure this composition thing out, which I'm still working on, but my wife said, well, you know, you can't do both. There's not enough time in the day. There's just not. If you do something well, you just don't have energy to do full time or something else. And so I left William Patterson and I joined the BMI Composers Workshop with Manny Alpin and Jim McNeely, and man, everything changed. It was very exciting, but then they asked me, he says, well, what do you want to write? I didn't know what to say. I couldn't, you know, they said, well, there's no film writing, no television writing, no circus music, no bar mitzvahs, no nothing, you know, what, you write what you want to write. I didn't know what to do. Everything that we do is pretty much prescribed. And so it took me a whole year just to figure that out. And but I got into it. It was thrilling. And so what I love more so than anything right now is the process of composition. And because I have music in my head, but I had to learn how to get it out, because I never studied, you know, academically composition. But I would buy books, and I always ask questions. So the people, and I've had some great people just give me a couple tips here, tips there, whatever. And for some reason, the things that I've written is resonating with people. And it's just like when we perform, we want to play well enough so people can continue to call us to play. Composition is the same for me. I would love to be able to have my music played more than once, you know, somewhere. And but it's very exciting for me at this point. And I still play. I still feel that that's what I do best. but I'm fighting. My bass is fighting the time. As a player, you need time. As a composer, you need time to think. And so I'm fighting with myself at this time. It's a good fight, though.
Wow, this has been incredible, Rufus. You just tingle me all over with your information, and I want to ask you before we conclude, what would you say to an upcoming aspiring serious bass player today?
Well, just to listen to all kinds of music, even though you may not like everything. Nobody likes everything, but bass players we have the unique ability to completely sabotage every group we play in. So if we're not paying attention with what the bass does, it's the anchor. It's and the group will either soar like a bird, or it'll go down the toilet. If the bass player, he or she, forgets about what it is we do. So there's I guess you could say it's a lot of power, but it's really a lot of responsibility of making, the hierarchy for me is like for me to play with the drummer and the drummer to play with me, and we hook up to the point where we become one, and then the pianist doesn't have a choice, or the guitarist doesn't have a choice. And then when the three of us get together, it becomes the trio, and then the rest of it. But I'm in the middle of that, and I can destroy it if I don't pay attention. So to answer your question, to really get friendly with the piano and learn the harmony and know why you're playing certain notes. I learned late. My ears, fortunately, were the best thing that ever happened to me, but I didn't know I got myself into positions that I didn't know. My ears got me out of trouble, and then I realized I need to protect myself, and that's really from the knowledge of the piano and whatnot. So bass players coming up are a premium. They will always work if they take care of what they need to satisfy what the composer wants, not what they want, to satisfy the song, however it's composed. And don't be a jerk, and because nobody really wants to be around people who are not, don't want to be fun to be around. You got to have fun. It's work, though. There's no luck. People say, you're really lucky, Rufus. I said, no, I work hard to do. And so I suggest not only bass players, they want it, it's out here. It's serious out here. And it's different than when you or me came up. It's different for the young players today. The playing field's different, but if you're creative, you'll figure a way,
Thank you so much. This has just been an incredible interview, and I want to say to the people that are listening, you all have heard it from the master, Rufus Reid, and he has laid out a plan, a pathway to success. Thank you, Rufus.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's good to see you after I don't even know how many years it's been. But good luck with the organization and spreading the word. It's what we all need, to keep the music alive. Oh, and I have a new album coming out in October, called Celebration. It's with my trio, but with the Sirius Quartet, which is a string quartet, and I'm really excited about that. And October 7th is the official release, and then I'm taking a band into Dizzy's in New York, October 28, 29, 30, quintet. And so if anybody's in New York during that period, stop by and say hello.
Rufus, everybody knows what you've brought to the table in the performing world, and to hear you share that journey will mean a lot to everybody who views this.
I hope so. Yeah.
To our viewers, thanks for joining us for this Jazz Zone Together interview. Please check out the entire library of interviews. We know you'll find them of real value to your program. Watch for updates as we're adding new interviews regularly.